Good evening, Thunder Wizards. So we'll see how long I stay on tonight. It's Friday, and a lot of partying and people parking on my street and walking to bars. And Thunder Wizard does not like that kind of mindless chatter. So, but also we'll see if the internet holds up well. Interesting. That's what I meant to say, but I complained about the noise. So we have still going on. We have Saturn and Ketu are in Gemini right now, and will be for a while. And this brings a strong push to bring spiritual concepts. And by spiritual concepts, I mean the concepts of getting to the truth, getting past illusion, letting go of illusion. So, I guess I want to address something here. Lots of times we profess beliefs, or we focus on things, or we represent ourselves in ways that are actually opposite to what we truly want. And this is called projection. Projection is, for instance, let me give you an example. If you've ever known somebody in a relationship who's always checking your phone, like they have to check your phone every 10 seconds, and they're always sure that you're out cheating on them. Now, sometimes they are just paranoid. There are just paranoid, jealous people. But there are people who are actual, like, serial cheaters. And that's what they do. They are certain that you're cheating on them. And that's because they're projecting their own reality onto you. So we can experience that, but we do that a lot of times in our beliefs. People who talk about love and light, everything is love and light, and I'm only a positive person, and I don't let myself go to those negative places. And these are people who are actually not full of love and light. Lots of times, these are people who are full of fear and depression and sadness. You see this a lot with people who use recreational drugs. THC especially. THC is really, THC users are infamous for this, where they will talk about love and acceptance and being mellow and cool, but then there will come a point where they will just snap. They also, in my experience, tend to be very passive aggressive, where they act as though they're really mellow and cool, when in reality, they're not. And that's because THC attacks the liver, and not only because of the toxins, but also energetically, it attacks the liver. That's why people get paranoid of THC, by the way. That paranoia where you don't know what the hell is wrong. Things like, just tell me I don't have to sit in this room forever. Those kinds of crazy things. Or just tell me that I can move if I want. Stuff like that. That kind of the paranoia. You don't know what you're afraid of. You're afraid of something. It means that your energy body feels attacked, and since you don't know what it is, you're just paranoid about everything. It's the liver. The liver is responsible for your protective aura. And I won't get into that. But I'm using that as an example, that sometimes we are the opposite of what we claim to be. And in my experience, there's a lot of people who talk about wanting to escape this world and wanting to cut through the illusion of this world. And yet they're very frightened and very angry, and especially when you hear people who want to go off about, them, whoever they are, the government, the elites, the, picket. Those people, when they talk about that, and those people who are trying to blind us with the truth, flat earthers, even though they want you to believe, or they want to present themselves, or they may actually believe that what they want is to cut through the lies to get to the truth, and that they're not into money and those kinds of things. In my experience, lots of times it's just pure projection. It's actually quite the opposite. And of course, this is on an unconscious level. They're not aware of it. Because true surrender, if you really want to surrender to the truth, then one of the things that happens is you stop caring about what other people do. You stop caring about what the world does. Listen, to be honest, I don't feel like an old guy, and I don't feel like I'm not. I feel like I'm still like in my 30s. Maybe all people feel like this when they get middle-aged. But I've been around long enough to know that, whatever it is that you think needs to happen in order to fix the world or fix the government, there's always been some problem. That if we could just fix that, or get this person, elected, or get this government up, the circus of illusion just continues. And then you come to realize this is just the nature of the human race. And I remember reading about Taoist monks who were very similar to this. And, when being told that, the Chinese Communist government was going in and destroying this and destroying that, they were like, that's not my problem. I'm just here meditating on this mountain. And then when it became, the ones that I know of, when it became clear that they weren't safe in their own country, then they just left and went to places like Taiwan and Hawaii. They don't try and change the world. They just focus on themselves, and they don't have an attachment to what people do or don't do. And there's an awareness that this world is a world of illusion. So again, a lot of people, when I hear a lot of people complaining and they're stomping about this has to change and those people are doing this and watch out for them and be careful of this, they're lying to you, and yet at the same time want to give off this impression that they are detached spiritual people who are only interested in the truth. It's my experience that actually there's a lot of attachment there. And so I wanted to I didn't really know what I was going to say. I thought I'd let K2 come and do some talking for us. But the idea that we can use death as an advisor. Because what is the message that death brings? The message that death brings is that we will all die. Whoever you are, whatever your personality is, whatever your identity is, whatever you attach yourself to, that will die. The human race will not go on forever. We know from all of the species that have come before us that species come and go. The dinosaurs came and went. And there was a period of time where, a couple million years ago, where there were, who knows how many different types of hominid, bipedal, human-like sort of ape humans running around. There was a bunch of them that were all living together at one time, and only one survived. And that was Homo sapiens sapiens, you and I. Our species is the only one that survived. And ironically, humans survived because of their adaptability. Their adaptability and the fact that they were capable of having children every 9 months. Apes don't have that ability, in case you didn't know that. Apes don't have the ability to squeeze out children every 9 months. So being adaptable and being able to squeeze out a bunch of kids gave us the ability to survive. In fact, there was one point I think it was 100,000 years ago, where we can see that there was a massive climate shift, and all of this rich, woodland and grassland and all that disappeared, and that's when the Sahara Desert appeared. And the only hominids that survived were these very adaptable species of humans that could squeeze out kids every 9 months. But there was almost not enough of us to be viable. That's why you can look at human beings' DNA and you can see where they all came from. That's why they can pinpoint down to at what point in time the first mother of all humans. They can pinpoint that. And it's because there was almost not enough viable breeding pairs to keep human beings alive. We almost didn't survive. But the ironic thing is, what allowed us to survive is also the very thing that makes us so destructive. That we have proliferated over the whole planet, and we are in danger of destroying it. So what death says, when we start to think about, we got to save the world, and believe me, there's nobody that wants to. For instance, one of my big issues, and I know there's going to be some people who are going to have some opinions that are just going to be a real pain in my ass, but I would love to do something to reverse global warming. But here's the fact of the matter. All of the greenhouse gases that have been released into the atmosphere cannot be bottled up again. And we have not, even if we were to stop all greenhouse gas emissions to zero today, like if we were to snap our fingers and make today zero greenhouse gas emissions, there would still be, I don't even know how many, maybe 100 or hundreds of years of warming that would continue, because we still haven't seen the effects of what has been released, and it would take a long time for that to turn around and reverse itself. And death says there's nothing you can do about it. It may very well be the end of the human race, or may very well be the end of society as we know it. When I sit and watch what's happening to my government, I have never seen the destruction, the deconstruction of government to the degree that we have. And people may like that or not like that. But the fact of the matter is that if things continue in the way that they're going, the three separate branches of government will cease, and we will probably either turn into anarchy, or we will go the way of the Roman Empire, which was that they were a republic that was completely against any kind of kings or emperors, and we know what happened. Caesar was given lifetime control over the empire. He became emperor, and I think that's where we're headed if things continue the way they are, where the government is self-destructing, it's destroying itself. Now, I could right now at this moment, because I'm in this K2 sort of mindset, I really don't give a crap what you think, and I'm not interested in getting into an argument with you. I'll block you and get rid of you the second you start spouting crap I don't want to hear. What I want to focus on is, I'm saying I'm willing to let it go. Let's let the United States die, and whatever's going to happen is what's going to happen, because every empire dies, and this may be the end of the American empire, for better or for worse. We may be seeing the end of the human race. We may be seeing the end of our world. I mean, all it would take is one major huge disaster, or one major meteorite. Take one. I mean, and they're all over the place. So it's not a question of if It's a question of when. So this is what K2 says. K2 says everything dies. Everything ends. This is what death says. And so the lesson of that isn't to get morbid. It's to, number one, focus on the existence of the soul, the eternity, the part of you that is eternal, and to make the most of what you have. And focusing on nonsense and getting bent out of shape over things you can't control is a waste of time. Like I really focus on what I can control and what I can't. I can't control what's going on in my government. I can't control what's going on in other parts of the world. You know, if you want to get bent out of shape over, you know, pick it. You know, Islamic terrorism or, getting, having your country, you know, infiltrated by a bunch of people running away from whatever disaster they are. Immigration, if that's your big thing. You know, death says, listen, everything dies. Everything dies and everything changes. And if you can do something about it, great. And if you can't do anything about it, stop wasting your time worrying about it, because it's going to happen whether you want it to or not. And then you're only left with right now. What can I do right now to get the most out of this? Human life is a tremendous, sacred opportunity. I was going to say privilege, but that gives it kind of a, moralistic standpoint. But it's a tremendous opportunity. And what a wasted opportunity. You know, I think of, you probably know, I won't mention who it is, but there's somebody that I talk about frequently who I've known since childhood, who, has a really unpleasant life. And because I've known this person my whole life, I've watched the decisions that this person has made. And from my perspective, I go, what a waste. I mean, it's a complete waste of a life. Simply because this person couldn't stop taking themselves too seriously. Trying to control everything, trying to control other people, and not doing the work to allow themselves to become aware. So that's kind of all I really want to say. I don't have anything other than that, other than, this is a necessary part of spiritual evolution. And, I've been teaching about how to become happy and how to achieve your soul desire. And I say that the most important thing, the only commandment that you have, is to have as much fucking fun as you can before you die. That's all you're required to do. And the real quest is to find out what is it that's really fun, and to figure out what you think is fun and what's not. Not to live in fear. Because there's no point in being afraid, because at some point you're going to die, so why spend time being afraid of it? And that's all fear is. Fear of money, fear of poverty, fear of old age, fear of not being loved, fear of being alone, fear of other people's opinions. These are all various themes on the same thing, which is fear of death. And a fear of being out of control. Because these are all things you can't control. You can't control other people's feelings. You can't control other people's opinions. You can't control if people love you or don't love you. You only have limited amount of control over your health. I mean, I can, eat right and meditate and sleep well and, take care of myself psychologically, and, I could get hit by a bolt of lightning or, any kind of thing could happen at any point. So there's just no point in being afraid. And so actually, to understand death, the lesson of death is to live, is to really understand how to live in the moment, because that is all you have. And surrendering, so letting go of control, not trying to control yourself, control your feelings, control anything else, because you can't do that and be in the moment. I like the Dagaj rune. The Dagaj rune for me means living, for me when I see that rune, I translate that as having fun. because it's being in the moment. It's the full expression of the soul, just like the full expression of the sun at midday. And that can only happen when you are completely surrendered to the moment. So ironically, the way to live the most is to surrender to your own death, to accept it, live with it, and surrender to it. So, those are some of my thoughts. Let's take a look and see if I have to make the speech about questions and all that. So, yeah, so if you are new to the channel, or even if you're not, this is a question and answer, and I would like to hear your questions. I don't want to hear your comments or whatever. So please write the word question if you have a question, and I will do my best to answer it if you have one. All right. Jameson Colliday, question. Could you please speak on practical application of death as a teacher? Letting go of old patterns, habits, and projection onto self. Okay, so it's a lot of stuff. The shorter your question, the better it is for me, because if I see a big paragraph, I know you're in your head. Question, could you please speak on practical application of death as a teacher? Well, that's what I've been trying to do. The most practical thing is what I've said, is to understand that you can't control anything, and to surrender to the unknown, and to surrender to the infinite, which means trust. There's an assumption in there into everything I'm saying, which is that that the universe, whatever word you want to use for that, wants you to have the ultimate life, as opposed to the Abrahamic version, which says that you're here to do God's will no matter how horrible it is. So the first practical thing is to stop worrying about garbage and ask yourself, what makes me happy? And go do that fearlessly. And the next practical thing that keeps popping up in my head, maybe this is just for you, but the next practical thing that keeps popping up in my head is, this is why I recommend doing energy work. You know, and I don't realize, I didn't really realize it when I started this, but the feeling that I was having that motivated me to make this subject tonight is what motivates me to do energy work. Like, for me, if I wanted to get close to the idea of listening to death as an advisor, I would be doing energy work. I would be doing Qigong. So specifically, if you go up to courses.thunderwizard.com or even neo.thunderwizard.com and you click on the Celestial Qigong, that connecting to that energy is a way to surrender to the infinite. Because here's the thing about death. Death is actually the gateway to infinite life. You know, real power. Real power can only be experienced through death. This is why in my ancestral tradition, Odin sacrificed himself and died to himself. It's interesting. I was every now and then I go on to other teachers' sites, and you know, some I like and some I don't. I went on to a site of one that I don't like, and I won't say who it is. But this person started talking about the runes and started talking about Odin in some blog, and mentioned that Odin came as close to death as possible without dying. And I thought, where did you get that? There's no place that it says that. It says he died. He died to himself. It was that death that opened him up to the runes. It wasn't getting close to death. And so that told me a lot about this person, and probably why I don't agree with or relate to anything this person says about, you know, Northern spirituality, because that tells me something. That tells me this person doesn't understand surrendering to death. This person's trying to stay alive. And that explains why, you know, when they talk about things, why I get such a pained look on my face. Now I get it. So, getting back to, I mean, you know, this, when I start talking like this, I get really spacey. So I'm having a hard time focusing. So getting back to your question, one practical application is to enjoy your life in the moment. The second one is to do energy work. Go up here and do celestial qigong. That's actually, connects you to a practical application of the knowledge of death. And the more you do it, the more you'll understand what I mean when I say that. All right, so let's see here. So the Jay-Z Haman, I'm assuming you're new to the channel. Welcome. Again, this is a question and answer. So I would like for you to limit your comments to just questions for me. Otherwise, I have to scroll through whatever you say to look for the people who have questions. Okay. Crone Woman Walking, question. What role does Hela have in being a teacher? There's something behind that question for you. It's hard for me to answer that because I know that there's something behind your question. You're having some kind of an experience with Hela that maybe you're feeling drawn to being a teacher and you're meditating on that or maybe challenged by it or something, but that's an interesting question. I don't know how to respond to it because I can tell there's something in it for you. And we're better off talking about why you feel motivated by Hela to become a teacher. I can probably better help you if I know that. Bryce Gertson question. I'm curious as to your thoughts on people who consciously choose to work with demonic forces. Trauma and resentment plays a role. Well, okay, so that's not a question, that's a statement. All right, does this reflect denying their own desires? Okay, so first thing you did, Bryce, is you introduced an assumption. And so whenever somebody introduces an assumption in the form of a question, it's sort of like you're trying to force feed me something to come onto your plane. And whether or not that's true, I don't know, but that's not really a question. Because you're kind of making a statement and then you're wanting me to explain your belief. So let's analyze your statement here. Your first question is, I'm curious as to your thoughts on people who consciously work with demonic forces. So that's a question where you're asking me, how do I feel about that? Or what are my thoughts about it? Then you go on to explain to me what it is. And that's what I want to find out if I agree with you or not. Trauma and resentment certainly play a role. So you're introducing the assumption that people who choose to work with demonic forces have been traumatized and have resentment. I don't disagree with that. Sounds like that's your experience or your observation. And then, so let's assume for argument's sake that that's true. That in your experience, people who choose to work with demonic forces are people who have suffered trauma and have resentment. And does this reflect denying their own death? Well, as I said earlier, everybody who does anything out of fear is in denial of their own death. So it is ironic. I will say this, our ancestors did not believe in a devil, like an all-powerful, evil being. The closest that they came would be Surt, which I don't believe Surt is a conscious entity that you can connect with. I think Surt is nothing more than the force of entropy. So if you don't know what entropy is, not you specifically, Bryce, but anybody else, go look it up. Entropy. It's a really interesting and frightening concept. And it's, basically it means once you start releasing certain forces, just like global warming. Global warming is entropy, by the way. It is the epitome of entropy. That we release these things into the environment, that once we've released them, you can't put them back, and it starts a chain of events that creates more chaos and destruction and entropy, and and so this is what CERT represents. CERT represents entropy. And as we know, Ragnarok is necessary for this world to become destroyed and transformed into the next one. People talk about Ragnarok all the time, but they forget that the myth of Ragnarok ends with a higher evolution, a higher harmonic of not only this universe but of the gods, because the gods and the giants destroy themselves. And it is this mutual assured destruction that creates the transformation, and the gods that come from that are a higher harmonic of the previous god. So Odin will die, and there will be a higher harmonic of Odin. Thor will die, and there will be a higher harmonic of Thor. And the Surt will also have a higher harmonic, because when you read that myth, you get to the end of it, and then it talks about the dragon under the earth, or something like that. And there's like this ominous sort of, if we were watching, a mini-series, there would be this ominous, is there going to be, a next one? And so it talks about the forces are still there, it's just a higher harmonic. So there's a force of destruction in the next, there isn't going to be like the Abrahamic tradition where you're going to reach this perfection and then it'll just stay there. There's always infinite. I don't think that we ever get to the end. I don't think it ever happens. I think there's this constant evolution. That is a frightening thought. It's comforting for this thought of coming to a permanent, perfection. That is a comforting thought. It is not a comforting thought, for me anyway, the idea that this thing keeps going. We have to keep going through this over and over again. Watching shows about the universe and astrophysicists talking about the fate of the universe and where the universe is going. And there was this really cool theory, which is now being challenged, which was that there was the Big Bang and the universe expanded out, and then there was this belief that the universe would expand out until gravity would take over, and then it would collapse back into itself and go into a big crunch and then explode again, and it would just go on and on like that. But the latest astrophysicists are saying that it doesn't look that way. That it looks like that dark matter is more powerful and dark energy is more powerful than gravity. And by the way, they just mean dark energy because you can't see it. It doesn't mean it's evil or dark. They just can't see it. So they call it dark. But they're saying that that's going to continue and that the universe is flat, which is interesting. It's not a globe, even though all of the planets and everything are globes and the stars are globes. But that the universe itself is not. It's infinite and it's flat. And so for all the flat earthers out there, you're right, but you're not right about this planet. The universe is flat, not the planet. And in other words, it means that if the universe were a globe, it would mean that if you go in one direction, that eventually you'll come back to where you are, like we do on this planet. If you fly, we can't sail in one direction because we'll hit a landmass. But you get in a plane and you fly in one direction, you'll eventually just keep flying over that same place over and over again if you have, endless fuel, because we live in a globe. So if the universe were a globe, it would mean that. So it means that That won't ever happen. The universe is flat. If you go in one direction, you're never going to come up behind yourself. And that the universe is going to continue to expand and expand and expand until gravity itself will lose cohesion. And so that's a really frightening, I mean, the thought of that to me is so uncomfortable. Except now there's this new theory that I can't explain it, but that what'll happen is that when that gets to a certain point, that dark matter and dark energy will shift, and they explain it in ways that I can't, and then it will actually collapse in on itself, and that made me feel a little bit better. I'm sharing this with you not because I want to get into a conversation about these things, because I'm not a physicist and I don't want to get into a conversation about it. I want you to feel it. I want you to feel the hopelessness, the lack of control. What if? And what does that bring up in you? You know, it really does focus again on all we have is the moment. And what about this thought? What about the thought that you don't survive death? What about that thought? How does that make you feel? The fact that people that you've known and loved, what if they don't survive? What if their consciousness doesn't exist anymore? It's a horrible thought. But those kinds of horrible thoughts, when we stop trying to control them, and when we stop responding to them out of fear, which is a way of trying to control things, when we respond that way, then we really do learn from death, which says, you know, don't take yourself so damn seriously, and just appreciate what you have. Make the most of it, because you never know, this might be it. All right, let's move on. Oh, you asked me, does this reflect denying their own death? Yeah, ultimately, yeah. I do. What I was going to say is, you know, I'll say it again, you know, there is no such thing as the devil in any shamanic understanding. You only, now I could be wrong about this, but in my research, even the ancient religions that had a devil were highly advanced civilizations, empires. Empires need a devil. You know why? Because empires are not a natural phenomenon. Human beings are not designed to be members of empires. And all empires are trying to be a one world government type of thing. This is why, by the way, this is why people don't like the idea of multiculturalism. It's not they're not really consciously thinking it through. What's really happening is that they're afraid of death. You know, we're going to preserve our culture, we're going to preserve our race, which ultimately is nonsensical because, you know, my race, my skin color, my eye color, and all that is a result of my black African ancestors 50,000 years ago being locked in an ice age where they needed, you know, because this was the only part of their face, and if you had a beard, only this part of your face is getting any sunlight, you know, and so you need to get rid of all the melanin so that you can absorb as much vitamin D3 as possible, or you die. And that's why, you know, in Europe, people don't have dark skin. It's because they're, you know, up until 10,000 years ago, they were living in ice age conditions, and people with dark skin didn't survive. They got sick, they got diseases because they didn't have enough vitamin D3. So the idea that you're going to preserve your race is ridiculous. It's never going to happen. It's impossible. Even if you got rid of, you know, for all you white separatists, supremacists out there, you know, let's just assume for argument's sake that you have a valid point. But we know this, and here's the thing, you know it too. This is what annoys me the most. You guys know that your point of view is untenable. You know that. You know the truth. You're just trying to pretend that you don't. And we all see it. And that's why we laugh at you. But even if you took all the, you know, just got rid of all other ethnicities and you just put white people on a tropical island. And if you came back in 40,000 years, guess what you'd find? You'd find perhaps people with some similar facial features, but they'd have very dark skin. Because all the people that didn't have enough melanin would have died. And the human body, DNA, has this ability to mutate, and the mutations that had darker skin and would keep improving on itself, and you'd find nothing but people with dark skin. I'm sorry, but that's just the fact of the matter. You don't have to fucking like it or not. I don't care. So you can't hold on to anything. And so anyways, as I was saying, so empires need a devil. Like racists. Racists need another race to fight against. It's the same concept. Empires need a devil. Because without a devil, people start to splinter and want to live in smaller communities. In order to keep people in this big, giant, mindless, faceless, like communism, perfect example, where you have no identity. Your identity is the state. That's a perfect example. You have to have a devil, and their devil was, Western imperialism or, Western materialism or capitalism. That was their devil. And Rome's devil was the barbarians. And so their whole mindset, even before monotheism, was they were going to go and bring civilization to the world, and they were fighting against the barbarians. And in the United States, when it came over, we were fighting against the pagans. And, so Native Americans and Africans and whomever, we enslaved and used them, and we would justify it by saying, we're bringing the light of the gospel to these lost souls. You can't have an empire without a devil. And that's why when we go back to our original ancestors, there was no devil. So getting back to this is all coming back to your question about why do people choose to work with demonic forces. What I'm trying to get at here is that there's no such thing as Satanism. That people who consciously think that they're worshiping Satan or the devil are actually people who are unconscious monotheists. Because they're so trapped in their belief of the one God. And it is, and understandably, it's such a frightening belief that there's this one judgmental asshole up there who's controlling your life. And so they rebel. And so what do they do to rebel? They find the one thing that is supposedly against it. But that's the whole thing. The devil is a creation of Jehovah. And I'm using that in multiple ways. I think Jehovah, I am that I am, is actually the human narcissistic ego. That's why Jehovah says, thou shalt have no other gods before me, all that kind of stuff. If you don't worship me, if you don't love me, he says, if you love me, you will follow all of my commandments. And if you do not follow all of my commandments, then you hate me. He doesn't say, if you love me, you'll try to follow my principles. He doesn't say, and if you don't follow all of them, then, I wish you the best. No, you have to follow every single one of them, or you hate him. And if you hate him, then he's going to destroy you. And he goes through all of these ways how he's going to destroy you. This is narcissistic ego. This is how narcissists function. So Jehovah is real, not that there is a God up there that I think is battling other gods. It's just we project it out there and we worship our own narcissistic ego. Now the devil is a creation of the narcissistic ego. It's the thing that allows God to be omnipotent, because without it, without the devil, that whole thing falls apart. So people who worship the devil are really frightened monotheists. They just won't admit it. So people who choose to work with demonic forces, I'm saying, I agree with you, they suffered trauma from authority figures, and they have projected that onto Jehovah. And they have resentment. Understandably, they don't feel loved, they don't feel accepted. They're like little kids having temper tantrums. And kids who rebel, like kids who live at home and they smoke and they party and they do all this. What they really want is they're trying to get mom and dad's attention. They're trying to get negative attention. And what's really happening is that even though they're pretending that they're rebelling, or they may consciously think that they're rebelling, in reality, they're trying to force mom and dad. There's like they're having a temper tantrum, and they're going to hold their breath and hold their breath until mom gives them ice cream. So I agree with you. Trauma and resentment certainly play a role in that, and so that's why people do that, in my opinion. There is no such thing as there are demonic forces. Don't get me wrong, but there's a whole. I don't have time to talk about what they really are, and they're all creations of ourself. Everything is our own creation anyway. So anyway, I could go on and on about that, but I don't want to take up more time than I need to. All right, let's. Collarbone Fairy, I take it that you're new to the channel. Please write the word question, otherwise I may miss it. You ask, what emptiness do you speak of? It's an incredibly general question, and I'm getting to it. So this whole thing we're talking about is the emptiness. So I want you to start thinking on a deeper level. Anything that I could answer in one word sentence wouldn't be enough to describe it. And this is how I teach. I want you to open your mind and go deeper than that. Do I believe demons exist? Yes, I do. What they are, that's a whole other subject. Timothy Zoll, question. Are you aware of musical acts such as Heilung and Wardruna? Yes, I'm aware of them. If so, can you share your opinion on their authenticity regarding Northern spirituality? No, because I don't know anything about them. I would have to know them. I mean, I've listened to a few of their songs. To be honest, it doesn't strike me. I don't feel like when I listen to it, I don't feel super. I know that a lot of Ancestral, focus Ancestral, they like it because, listen, let's talk about focus Ancestral for a moment. So I'm K2 right now. I'm talking from, a K2 perspective, which means I don't give a crap what any of you think. And if I lose people over this, see you later. But first off, there was no such thing as Ancestral back in the day. That Ancestral is a modern creation that was created sometime in the 60s or 70s, and it was created as a political movement. It was an expression of a conservative political movement, which had racial exclusionism in it. I didn't say racism, because that might be up for debate. But the guys who started that, the modern Ancestral movement, definitely had a racial separatist understanding, which means before they became Ancestral, they were whatever they were, and they just had problems with other races and immigration and all that other same kind of thing. And my thing is this: when I made I stopped comments on my previous video about, the guy in Sweden who wants to outlaw the runes, and I ultimately said I don't think you can do that. But I would totally support. Not that I would put any backing to it. I mean, I wouldn't really care one way or the other. But if somebody wanted to pass a law in their country that they wanted to make it against the law for people to use any kind of spiritual symbols for their political party or movement, I would be behind that. because this is where a lot of tragedy has occurred. Christians did it. Christians went around the world and used the cross to justify, all kinds of horrific things. Slavery, Holocaust, all kinds of things. And, the Nazis did the same thing with the Filfot. They used a spiritual symbol and used it to try and wipe out entire races of people. So it was incredibly damaging. And the reason why, it's because spiritual symbols have strong emotion, people have strong emotional attachments to them. And if you keep continuing to sell somebody on the idea that this spiritual symbol is associated with my political belief, then the political belief stops being political and becomes spiritual. And that's when people start going in with pitchforks and killing and destroying and maiming under the name of God. That's how it starts. It's one of the things that happens in there. And people didn't get that. People wanted to fight with me about, should they have nationalism? You can be nationalist if you want. Should there be discussions about immigration? Yeah, that's a political thing. I have no problem with that. If somebody wants to come with me, I'm watching what's happening here. I'm not stupid. There at some point it's going to be, a problem on the economic aspects of the country. It's going to have effects, and we can talk about the positive effects. I myself have lived. The other thing is that the majority of nationalists and racists live in very isolated conditions where they're only surrounded by the people that they see and they know, and they never get out of that. So all they see is differences, and because they're, whatever it is, uneducated, stupid, emotionally unevolved, or have psychological issues, they project all of their inferiority complexes onto things that are different from them. That's just a fact. I've lived in it. I've lived in South Central a couple of different times in my life for years at a time. I can tell you, this is my experience. I grew up in a very upper class, all white, not just neighborhood, it was just a big area full of rich white people. And I can tell you that I was far more miserable there, and that people were far crueler to me. They're nasty fucking people, man. I got fucking picked on and beat up and all kinds of shit. All kinds of crazy shit happened living in what you would think would be this really safe, environment. And the times that I lived in South Central, where I was surrounded by people from all different countries and all different races. They were the nicest, most friendly, most community, everybody went out of their way to make me feel loved and safe and a part of. I was always being invited to this and that, and people made room for you so you could park, and where I lived, the last time I was there, last time I lived there, which was a few years ago, up in the all-white place where I grew up, there was this big, giant, empty street, and I was parking on the farthest part of this guy's giant 1-acre house, and I had on the street. I had my car legally parked on the street, and he had to write a note saying, "Move your car out from in front of my house." It's just like, what the fuck? Seriously? So I know from experience. That's why when I hear people talking about other races and people, immigrants and other religions and how they're doing this, I know that they have limited experience. I know that they do. And that's how I know that they're ignorant. That's how I know that they're uneducated for the most part. Even if they're educated, there's still some ignorance and some fear there. I know, because if you actually had to go and live in a multicultural society, the end result of a multicultural society is that people are far more loving and caring and giving and much, much more cooperative. That's the fact of the matter. So getting back to this, I know that a lot of people like Hailing and Wardruna, I don't know them well enough, but when I see somebody chanting a rune and the whole audience chanting a rune, and then it becomes this, our people and our stuff, which is not the same as honoring your ancestors. I want you to listen to what I just said. Chanting, "This is the symbol of our people and our race," is not the same as honoring your ancestors. And these people don't understand that. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And the reason why they don't understand it is this, and this is where K2 has to come in and give me some space, because for Northwestern Europeans to honor their ancestral tradition, we are in its infancy. We have only been doing it for 30 years. So we're infants. And so we are going to act like infants. And so people, again, here's the other ironic thing. White people want to go around because they don't have ancestral connection. That's why they want to become Native Americans. They want to pretend to be Native Americans because they don't have shamanic ancestry to tap into. So that's why they do that. And Native Americans don't like that because they're coming in and picking and choosing shit they don't understand and making stuff up and then, appropriating it. And they don't like that. But I forgot where I was going with it. But because we don't have a connection, an unbroken connection to all of that, here's the part. I find it really silly. It's just so silly that, the Folkish Asatru people don't want to allow anybody outside of the white race to practice Asatru. And you don't see, tell me how many thousands, how many millions of people of other ethnicities are waiting in line to become Asatru. They're just not there. So who are you fighting against? What is it you're trying to protect? It's just, again, it's idiocy. Listen, it's childish. And that's what I'm trying to say, is that it's a new movement, and because it's a new, not a movement, because it's a new adventure for us trying to reconnect to our ancestral understanding. Because it's so new, people are still infants, and infants are like that. That's mine. You can't have it. That's not fair. That's what little kids do. And so for Folkish Asatru to say, nobody else of any race can be a part of this, when, it's like, everybody's like, well, I didn't want to be a part of that anyway. I got my own thing. I don't need your thing. I got my thing. It's just, it's like a little kid with a ball walking out onto the recess and saying, "This is my ball and you can't play with it." And a bunch of other kids are already playing with their own ball. Whereas, if you're comfortable, you go, "Hey man, that's a cool ball. Can I play that? Here, play with mine for a second." Like if I'm out there surfing and I see somebody I know and he's got a new board and I'm like, "Hey man, can I try your board?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then we switch boards and I ride his and he rides mine. And it's still mine. I can take it and he can take his and go home. But what if, wow, his board is better for me and my board's better for him? Then we might go, "Hey man, do you want to trade?" Those are people who are comfortable in themselves. They're not little 4-year-olds. Anyway, so my opinion on their authenticity regarding Northern spirituality, I don't see there's anything inauthentic about Halung or Wardruna. I don't see anything inauthentic about it, but I don't see anything more authentic about it than anything else either. All right, so what else? The Zijhaman question. If you're going to write a question, please put a subject, a verb, and an object. All right? Put some time and effort into it. If you want to be I don't know if you want to be my student. If you want to follow me, this is one of the things that we do, is putting effort into things. I have to say, one of my biggest pet peeves about life in general is that people don't pay attention and they don't put effort into it. And most problems would be solved if you did those two things. So, you say, influence of Saturn in life and death, ? What is that? Karma and Saturn in general. Well, stop asking questions in general, for one, because you're asking me to give you a superficial answer to these deep subjects. So I want to answer your question, but I'd prefer if you actually have a deep question, a specific question. I'm happy to answer it. But influence of Saturn in life and death is too general. Crone Woman Walking question. Is it possible for Qigong to cause a spiritual death or ego death on an electromagnetic level? Well, the first part of your question is yes, it is possible. And if you do some of the stuff I teach, you will go through a spiritual death, which is nothing more than a transformation of your ego and your identity. Because here's the thing about power. If you really want to be powerful, like if you want to have the power of a true wizard, well, like Odin, then you will have to die. In fact, there are some practices where they expect you to physically die. I could name some things that I've learned where when you learn a certain practice, at some point they expect you to die. Like you'll pass out for either a few seconds or a few days. And then when you wake up, you'll be different. That's an extreme version of the shamanic illness, where shamans oftentimes become deathly ill and then they have a near-death experience. And it's in the same vibe as that. So the kind of stuff that I teach will definitely do that. If you've got attachments, if you've got emotional and spiritual and psychological attachments to things, the kind of stuff that I teach you're going to go through it. The more attached you are, the more challenging and the more of a death it's going to be. The less attached you are, then it'll actually be exhilarating. You know, this is one thing about seeking death. You know, like the whole ninja idea of seeking death, being willing to die at any moment. You know, where if the samurai, says to his follower, "Kill yourself," he has to be willing to pull his sword out and kill himself right on the spot. And then, of course, they stop him at the last minute. No, don't do it. But they got to be willing to go there. Now, I'm not saying that that's something that people should teach. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that's a good example of being willing to face death and look at death. But it's the death of self. It's not the death of others. Okay? The negative side of K2, since we're talking about K2, the negative side of K2, which is what I'm saying is not a positive way to go, is suicide bombers. That's the lower vibrational expression of K2, where somebody's willing to die for a spiritual cause and take other people out with them. And that's obviously does nothing but cause more pain and destruction. That is a childish understanding of that. But yeah, every time energy work will do that. I don't know what you mean by on an electromagnetic level. I'm not sure what that means, but I think I answered your question. Timothy Zoll, question. Do you believe that dualistic thinking is the primary cause of people's dysfunction? I don't know that dualistic thinking is the cause. I think it's the result. Because dualistic thinking is wanting to escape your feelings. We talk about racists, okay? Here's the deal with racists. Racists got their feelings hurt somewhere. Somebody made them feel unloved. Somebody made them feel ostracized. And they're projecting that onto other races. They do it. One of the first things that, the childish arguments that racists will come up with, like if I say something to the effect of, let's embrace multiculturalism. If you're comfortable in your beliefs and in your culture, and if you're, okay, so you like to, sleep with white people instead of, nobody's forcing you. Nobody's going to put a gun to your head and force you to have sex with somebody you're not attracted to. Nobody's forcing you to do that. If you're comfortable with that, then you're going to be comfortable with anybody coming in and doing whatever the hell they want. Oh, that guy wants to, I was married to a Chinese woman. I was married to a Jewish woman. I had teachers who were African American. And look what's happened to me as I've gotten into my middle age. I've gotten more into my own ethnic, ancestral, spiritual practice than ever before because of their influence on me. See what I mean? So, dualistic thinking, what I was going to say back, racist, somebody got their feelings hurt. Either their parents were dysfunctional towards them, or they got their feelings hurt. I know of a few people who have contacted me who are racist and racial exclusionists, and they don't understand why I won't back their folkish whatever. And I say to them, I've lived with people of all different races, and I can count on my hand the amount of times I've been, targeted for it. I mean, 1 or 2 times maybe. The rest of the time, everybody's been really wonderful to me. So why would I have anything against them? Why would I want to exclude them from anything? Some of them have been really, really instrumental in my life. They're just humans. And the response was I remember one guy telling me that he got targeted when he was a kid. And he got, who knows, whatever. He got racially targeted for being white. And so he's come to the conclusion that all people of that ethnicity are going to be out and want to hurt him. And, it's a childish thing. He got his feelings hurt. And my point is if he can get honest with his feelings and work through them, then he doesn't have to, it's just a little child that got his feelings hurt. And that's what I see when I look at racists. They're just little kids that got their feelings hurt somewhere, and they don't have the permission within themselves to mourn over that. It's sad when people don't accept you. It hurts for whatever reason. And I think if, dualistic thinking, to answer your question, is a way to escape your feelings. So whenever people are pointing outside of them, it's the government, it's this, it's the devil, these are people I can guarantee you who are not having the ability to feel their own feelings. Because when you can feel your own feelings, then you can tell somebody. I'll give you an example. One of my acting teachers, an African American guy, and I did one of the few times I was targeted. I remember some guy in college came up to me and started going off about white people, something or other, and all that. And and it really hurt me because I'm like, this guy doesn't know me. Doesn't know anything about me. Why is he treating me like? Why is he assuming that I'm a racist and that why is he assuming all these things about me? It really hurt my feelings. And I could feel myself wanting to become prejudiced against that. And I went to my teacher and I told him about it. And he says, that has nothing to do with you, right? This was a black guy. He says, that has nothing to do with you, right? And I said, I don't know. He says, it's got nothing to do with you. He doesn't know you. And then he shared a story. He said, this is a guy, in the 50s. This was back in the 80s. And he was talking about back in the 50s when he lived in New York or wherever it was. And, he had a chip on his shoulder against white people. And he was around some Jewish guys, and I don't know what he did, but he did something to have them say, hey man, what are you getting upset with us for? We didn't do anything to you. We got our ass handed to us too. And that's when he sort of woke up. And he realized it's got nothing to do with anybody else. He said something I'll never forget. He said, people who hate don't survive. One of the most powerful things, I'll never forget it. He said, people who hate don't survive. And he says, I want to survive. One of the best teachers I ever had, that guy. So dualistic thinking is a result of being afraid of your own emotions. You're hiding from your own feelings. So it's not the cause of people's dysfunction, it is the result of the emotional dysfunction. Grebner Thomas, can the seed sound thung be done silently? Yes. For those who don't know, we talk about seed sound, so you have to search my channel for those things. Crone Room and Walking question. Maybe Hella will want me to teach runes. Maybe she will. Is it proper to make an offering to Hella in thanks when she dishes out the strong medicine? Of course. Yeah, Hella is Hella after all. You know, Hela is, she's not the goddess of, see, I just stopped myself because I can hear her saying people won't understand if you say that. So it would be easy for somebody to come to the conclusion that Hela was a goddess of death. So yeah, one of the things that we do in shamanism is we deal with dynamic balance. And there's always a dynamic balance. This is why I use the word shaman, because in the past 2,000 years, spiritual religions and beliefs have gravitated toward this idea of reaching a perfected state, whether it be in heaven or reaching enlightenment or moksha or liberation or whatever it is. And it has this assumption that we're going to finally be done and we'll reach this plateau and it'll all just be static. And I don't believe that. I just think that existence is a dynamic balance, and that's the best we can get. This beauty of, you know, a dynamic balance. That's why I love surfing. You know, surfing is, you constantly are dealing with this moving water all the time. And it's a dynamic balance. You never just sit there and just cruise, unless the waves are really tiny. So yeah, I think making an offering to Hela is a way to create a dynamic balance with a force that, if you are not in alignment with yourself, the force of Hela can be incredibly challenging. That's why Hela is half corpse, rotting corpse, and beautiful maiden. Because depending on how attached you are, if you are attached to your life, which is meaninglessness, which is death, true death is being attached to life. If you're attached to your desires in your life, then it's like trying to, you know, keep fruit. You can only keep fruit for so long. Like, I like to go buy apples, and sometimes, you know, I'm not in the mood for an apple for a week, and I'll come back and the fruit will be all rotted. It's not going to just sit there. It's going to rot. If you buy apples, you got to eat them. Bananas, you know, if you buy bananas, you got to eat them. Otherwise, they're going to get old. Milk, you know, not that I drink milk, but, you know, you got to drink it, you know, within a time period, or it's going to get old and rancid. And attachments in life and our desires are the same way. We can't store them up. You got to live them. And if we store up something, you know, whatever our desires are, or our attachments to being whatever, then those things start to rot. And so when that happens, Hela comes to us, and we see her as this rotting corpse, because she's reflecting back your attachment to a desire that's starting to rot. But if you don't have any attachments, like if you were completely free of attachments, then she would be this beautiful, bright, young maiden coming toward you. Okay? Crone woman walking through down $2, thank you. All right, I don't see any more questions here. Since we're talking about energy work, I am going to take a short break, and we will talk about this energy work that we've been mentioning here. Hi, I'm Michael Denny of SpiritTao.com, and this is Celestial Negong Part 1. Celestial Negong means that this is power that is descending from heaven. And the idea is that we are all microcosms of the entire universe. You are the entire universe, and everything around you is simply the projection. You are looking within yourself. So when you look up into the stars at night, you're actually looking deep within your own body. When you look at the sun, the moon, the trees, the flowers, you're looking within yourself. This is Negong. And so what we're doing is we're simply releasing that infinity from within us. You are tapping into and releasing the power that is within our own body, our own cells. our own organs. So one of the reasons that I'm making this DVD is in the hope that the essence and the spirit of the teaching of the Shang-Qing arts can be taught to the world at large, and it is my hope that the core essence of what the Shang-Qing tradition is will continue to live and grow and evolve. As we move on into the Aquarian age, everything is changing. I don't need to tell you that. The entire world is changing, and what we are seeing now is that if people hold on to external things, they are very challenged in life. And those who are making the transition into the next phase that we are moving into in the world as we approach 2012, those who look within and find their source of strength from within, those are the people who are getting the most out of life and will make the transition into the next phase of evolution most comfortably. It is my belief that the Shang-Qing tradition is one method whereby human beings can evolve into the next level of being in the most comfortable fashion and be able to take advantage of the rapid, energetic, mental, and spiritual changes that are going on in the world today. All right, we're back. See if there are any questions. Nope, don't see any questions. All right then, well, so I guess we'll call it an evening. I don't have a whole lot to say, but yeah, I sort of called on Death as an advisor and called on K2, and you know, that's what happened. All right, so what do I want to say? Okay, so we're coming up towards the end of May. In case you're interested, for the month of May only, I have a special, which if you go to 241.thunderwizard.com, you can get the Vedic astrology training and certification and the rune study and certification for the price of one. So, and that's because I'm getting ready to, very soon here, less than 3 weeks, I'm heading off to Australia for who knows how long. I'm getting rid of everything, gonna live out of a suitcase, and so I've got myself, consciously, I've got myself in debt to pay for, you know, my lodging and everything for the next few months, next 6 months actually. So I could use some money to help me start paying that stuff off. So for the month of May only, 241.thunderwizard.com. And what you may want to know is that the rune teaching that I do in the certification is actually pretty extensive. Every single video teaching that I have, whether it is on this YouTube channel, or whether it's on the paid Patreon channel, or whether it is in one of the DVDs, the paid for DVDs, every single rune video that I have available is on that site. And so if you really want to learn the runes inside and out from my perspective, advanced rune shamanism, rune divination, it's a lot of stuff there, in case you're interested in that. So for that, if you want to take advantage of that, go to 241.thunderwizard.com, because after May I will take that back and that won't be available anymore. All right, so unless there's any more questions, all right, hang on a sec. So Eddie Endress has asked a question which YouTube has tried to block because I didn't understand it, so I will put this out here for you. Eddie Endress says, question, can you please give us some background on Shii-Ching? I don't know what that is. Am I saying that right? S-H-E-A-C-H-I-N, Shii-Ching? I've never heard of that. Are you saying the I Ching? Are you saying this? Can I give you background on the I Ching? Are you talking about, so that's Chinese, it's more deeper than that, but that's, one of the things the I Ching is Chinese divination, so the shamanic divination of China. I can't give you any background on it, because to be honest with you, I just don't know enough about it. So sorry, I can't. I mean, I've done it, and it's a very interesting and deep and powerful practice, but I don't know enough about it to tell you any more than that. Eddie Endres. Okay, I don't know what the question is, but you say the type of spiritual martial art mentioned in the Cosmic Qigong video you just showed. What are you asking me? I need to know what your question is. I don't know what your question is. So do you have, can you ask that more clearly so I know what you're asking me? Give you a couple minutes. In case you guys, oh, I already did it. While I'm here, neo.thunderwizard.com. First off, if you're new to the channel, subscribe and hit the bell button. Neo.thunderwizard.com. If I were to condense the 4 most important things necessary in my belief to not only be successful in life, but also in my spiritual practice, it would be neo.thunderwizard.com. It doesn't mean, wanting to practice runes or wanting to practice Vedic astrology or mantra or those kinds of things. If you wanted to do that, those are really powerful things, but not everybody, is called to that. But the 4 things, the 4 tools that I talk about at neo.thunderwizard.com, in my opinion, are things that everybody needs. And that's my bias. So that's why it's up there, and I recommend that you check it out. It's well worth it. Let me talk about investing in yourself for a moment. I don't know why it is. I don't know why I attract so many people that complain about money or have money issues. That is my karma or whatever. But let me tell you something. I got to be honest with you. Every single time that somebody mentions money and the lack of money for why they don't purchase one of my teachings, whether it's astrology certification or whether it's Qigong video or whether it's the 5 rules to master the matrix or apprenticeship. Now, I don't care if you want what you want. I don't think everybody should want to follow my thunder path. I don't have that need at all. I just share what is, what I've learned and what works for me and what I think can be helpful for others. But when somebody says in one sentence, I really want to learn this thing of yours, but I don't have the money yet, the first thing that pops up in my mind is this big giant bullshit. I just don't believe it. Because I know that you spend money on cell phones. I know that you spend money on internet, unless you're like 12 years old and you live with your parents. And even then, you can go and mow lawns or something. Unless you're a kid that lives with your parents, you spend money on things you want all the time. I know you probably spend money to go out and party, to buy some beers, to, a cable television, car, gas for your car. If you really wanted something that inexpensive, $25 a month, $50 a month, $100 and something for a certain, some of the stuff is like $40 and $50, and if you're really that fucking poor, there's something broken, something really wrong, because it's not impossible. Stop drinking coffee for a month. That'll save you $30 right there, probably more than that. Don't go out and eat at restaurants. You know what I mean? I mean, I just don't believe it. I don't believe it. So, I'm never going to, I don't care what you buy or don't buy. Seriously, I don't have any personal attachment to it. As long as my bills are getting paid, and right now my business is going okay, my bills are getting paid, so I'm not going to complain. But I just don't buy it when people complain about not having enough money to get something that they want that is affordable. I don't believe you. So stop thinking in those terms, and here's what I've learned is that when you invest in yourself, your money rises. I'm doing it right now. If you had any idea how much money that I've spent to secure 6 months of lodging in Australia, and I'm a rental car. If you want to talk about expensive, I'm going to be driving a rental car for 6 months, and I gotta pay for that up front. And how much it's going to cost, plane tickets and all that other stuff, and just what it costs to get rid of things. I mean, I'm watching money fly away from me because I'm giving and getting rid of stuff. So it's not that I'm sitting here on a pile of money and I don't know what it's like, but I understand that when you financially, not just financially, when you invest in yourself in any way, it always comes back to you. So if any of these things are things that you want, and you've been saying to yourself, well, I'll wait until I have more money, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, I think you're just looking for an excuse to stay stuck. Loosen stuff up. Get something that means something to you. Now there are some people that kind of go overboard, and I think today I said to somebody, hey, listen, you don't need that yet. You got plenty of stuff to work on. You can buy that thing later. But for now, work with what you got. So it's, I will say that. It's not like if I think somebody has enough on their plate, I'll tell them. But if you're desperate and you're one of those people that complains because I don't do this and I don't make enough specials and all that, I don't buy it. I'll never buy it. I'll never think that you're that poor. If you wanted it, I've always been able to find a way. If I want something, I always find a way for it. All right, so I don't know what got me thinking about that. Not you, Eddie Endress. I'm not saying that you're that, but that got me thinking about that. All right, so the type of martial arts you mentioned in your Cosmic Qigong video, can you please tell us more about the lineage, the history behind it? Yes, I could, but here's the thing. I am what's known as a Sijo. I think I said that right. There's Sifu, which is teacher, but it means father teacher, and then there's Qigong, and the Qigong is like a grandmaster, and then there's a Sijo. A Sijo is somebody who starts their own lineage. Now they may have been in a lineage, and they may have trained in a lineage, but at some point, either because they got permission from their teachers to create their own lineage, or they choose to break off on their own and start their own lineage. I am of the second category. I chose to go off on my own, and I took information that I had, and I created a syncretic connection, and that's what I teach. The Celestial Qigong, even though my teacher gave me permission, I asked him, I went to him and I said, I'm planning on doing this. Do I have your permission? He said, yeah, you do whatever you want. And then I went and did it. And then as soon as I put it out there, he disowned me. He's never even told me why to this day. I can guess, but he never told me why. So that just sort of, he gave me permission and then he ostracized me. And that was the universe. The universe was setting me up, because if I had stayed in that lineage, I would never have created all the things that I did. I would never have been forced to learn the things that I've done and syncretize all the things. So I can tell you about it, but I'm not going to, because I don't have their permission. I'm not going to talk about people without their permission. And the truth is that even if I was in that lineage, and I was still within that lineage, and I'm hearing the ancestors are saying, trust me, you're still in the lineage. But even if I were officially still in the lineage, I wouldn't be telling you their names. because these people don't want that kind of attention brought to themselves. The Grand Master, if you were to confront him on the street and ask him, he would deny it. He would say, no, I'm just a Tai Chi teacher. I don't know anything about that other stuff. I'm a Tai Chi person. I'm into nonviolence, and I'm just a, and he'd be completely lying to you. Because that's what they do. That's their deal. So no, what can I tell you? Let me see, what can I tell you? What I can tell you is that I'm trying to pin down what's coming to me here. What I can tell you is that the people that the ancestors from whom this stuff comes from were people that come from a long line, like we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of years of spiritual practitioners who are seeking to connect with what I'm referring to as death as an advisor. I can tell you that at the higher levels, this stuff will always frighten right-hand path practitioners. And I've seen and heard of people doing the sets. Now the celestial qigong probably won't do that, but the actual, the higher level physical stuff, people, if they look at it, they would immediately say, ooh, that's demonic. And actually it's from a lineage of people who fight demons with their bare hands. And they were people who sought to become immortals. Immortals are people who chose to seek to raise the vibrational level of their physical body to a level where they didn't have to reincarnate. And when they get to a certain level, they stop functioning on a level where you can see them. So they're not like spirits, and they're not people. They're on this other plane. Now I'm just telling you what was told to me. And I can tell you what I experience when I do it, when I really get into it. That's all you need to know. I'm not going to give you any other information about them because, number one, it wouldn't do you any good, and number two, I don't think they want any attention brought to them. So I don't know if I answered your question or not. Steve Borowski question. I've been thinking about methods for mitigating my issues with my planets or maximizing the positive effects. Was wondering, will your Vedic astrology course help with this at all? Of course. That's one of the things you do with Vedic astrology. So here's the thing about any of my courses, by the way. Like I used to get this question where people would want to know, I want to know exactly what powers I'm going to get from doing your Qigong. And I would say, I don't know. How do I know how it's going to affect you? But the other thing is, it's like, you're wanting to know what it is ahead of time, and it's like wanting to know what it's like to live in a foreign country you've never heard of before. You don't know until you do it. So if you're thinking about doing my Vedic astrology course, choose to listen to that instinct or not, or sit and ask yourself if that's something that you want. So on the one hand, you're asking questions that you won't know until you do it. But the other answer to your question is, yeah, that's one of the things that we learn how to do. You're going to find out which planets vibrate with the three different minds. You're going to be able, you won't even need to go to me, you'll be able, just by doing the course, you'll be able to know how to create a ritual for yourself based on your chart. It's one of the things that I do. When I give people a mantra ritual, it's not just I'm pulling some mantra out that I give to everybody. It's a mantra that's based on your chart. Not only which planet, but if you and I have the same planet that we can benefit from working from, You may need to work with a different deity for that planet than me based on your chart. Because if your chart is different than mine, your moon sign and or your ascendant is different, then you're not going to want to work with the same planetary deity as me, even if we're both worshiping the same planet. You'll be able to learn that all on your own. You won't even need to go to me. You'll figure it out all on your own. So yeah, it'll help you figure out how to balance all that stuff. Or for planning various times, events, rituals. All right, so let me answer that. That is a whole different subject. That is a powerful subject, and there are probably at some point I may take up that study and teach that. But what I did with my astrology, my specific style of astrology, is that I wanted to get away from any kind of temporary planetary whatever, transits, because it's, that's one of the reasons why that keeps other astrologers in business, is because people constantly call them and say, okay, this week, what should I do about my business? This week, tell me about love. This week, and it drives me crazy, that kind of stuff, because I want to know, tell me things that I can do to fix the rest of my life. The Aruda Lugna is a perfect example. Your Aruda is your Aruda when you're 10 and when you're 100. And so, if you know what your reflection is, the Aruda is how people see you. It's your superpower that will give you success if you know what it is. So if you learn how to dress that way and express yourself and do things associated with it, you will be successful. Now that's something you can use throughout your life, regardless of what planetary whatever is going on. So while I appreciate that kind of stuff, that's not something I focus on. So if you're asking me, planning for various times and events, rituals, you might learn some of that, but that's really not my focus. I mean, I know about it and I can do that if I want, but my experience for me has been the things that don't change in my chart that are specific to me are more powerful than any of those temporary things, in my experience. So, not that you can't go do that, but that's not really my focus. Black Earth Productions says, what up everyone, and I want to encourage all of you to go to his channel and to his website, blackearthproductionswithaz.com. Cosmo Joe question, on top of consistent practice, is there anything you can do to prevent regression? I don't know what you mean by regression. Do you mean emotional regression, psychological regression, or energetic regression? Psychological regression you cannot avoid, because every time you go through any kind of crisis, which is becoming more conscious, one of the first things that happens is that we regress. We fall back into our old ways. So you can't avoid regression. This is why it's good to have a counselor and to have a group of people who will catch you and say, hey, you're, whatever language you want to use, hey, you're regressing, you're doing it again. But knowing you, Cosmo Joe, I think what you're asking is energetically. And again, I want to point out to you, what's behind your question. And what's behind your question is fear. Because as we know, your thing is that you want to gain and gather as much energy and sort of anal retentively grab as much as you can and hang on to it, and that's why you're focused on things like immortality and stuff like that. So that's where your question is coming from. So my point to you is, don't worry about it. Be with the flow. Learn how to surrender. This whole video is about surrendering. Surrendering to the inevitable, surrendering to death, and trusting that the universe will take care of you even in your death. So, but you don't have to worry about it. Why you're worrying about it is, why do you worry about energetically regressing? And then he says, it feels like energetic stagnation sets in fast and meridians get gummed up again next day. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't have that experience when I'm practicing. I don't have that experience at all. I do think what is happening is that there may be, when you're doing the energy work, you do let go of that left-brained, anal retentive thing that wants to control and fix and figure everything out. The intellectual side of you, I think you let go of that, and then what happens is that you go back to that. It snaps back in, and I think the other thing that happens is that just like lifting weights. If you don't lift weights for a while and you go in and lift, you're going to be really sore. On the one hand, you go, oh great, my muscles are sore, but then you look for that. But then, you get to a place where, you're not sore every time. You can go and lift really hard, and if you're doing it consistently, you won't get sore. And a lot of guys go, gosh, I got to push harder, and you don't. Same thing is true with Qigong. I mean, you do Qigong and your energy level, especially in the beginning, it rises and whoa, feel all that energy, but then you rise to a level with it and you don't feel it anymore, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. So your experience of it gumming up the works and becoming energetic stagnation, I think that's your head telling you, judging, just having a normal scenario where now you've become used to the energy, and that's okay. So again, I don't know enough about it. It could be because when you're not doing it, that your intellect jumps in there, and that will stagnate the energy. So if you want to let the energy flow, then go back to this surrender. And we've talked about this before, but find that place of fear. For you, there was a while when you would meditate, and when you'd start to go to that emptiness, it would really scare you. And the fear is just the fear of letting go. Stop trying to control things is the fear of letting go of control. So whenever you start feeling gummed up, then just go back to that and think about letting go and think about something you can't control. What frightens me is the thought of the universe expanding forever, like some of the astrophysicists say, that the universe, will not come back together. It will expand forever until all of the, at one point, what'll happen, however many billions of years from now, is that our solar system will be so far away from any other stars that there won't be any other starlight. It'll just be black sky. And then it will expand out so far that gravity will disintegrate and the sun will come apart, and there won't be anything left. It'll just be this empty black soup forever. That thought puts me into a place where I can surrender, because you have to surrender to that, otherwise it's just too frightening. So you think of whatever frightens you and go there and accept it. That'll get you out of gumming up the works. Outside of that, maybe go see a really qualified acupuncturist and see if maybe there's something blocked up in your meridians. Steve Borowski, I don't know if that's a question. I'm not seeing a question there. Okay, it's not a question. Out of the blue, question. As far as your shaman path, can you shed some light on soul fragmentation and soul retrieval practices? Well, I think that for me, I do believe in the idea of soul fragmentation, and I do believe in the idea of soul retrieval. I don't think there is any one method, because I think it is symbolic. For me, soul fragmentation is about you in conflict with your soul desire. And let's walk through that again. Soul desire is, when you were born, your soul came into this life with something it wanted to experience. And it built into that desire a button, a switch that let you know you were on the right path. That switch is, it gives you joy. So people want to know, how do you know God's will? If it gives you joy, it's God's will. Now, built into that is the life path lessons, which are as you go after your soul desire and you go after your joy, sometimes immediately you'll switch. You'll go from, wow, that's so beautiful, to, oh, I can never do that. That would be wrong. I can't believe I just thought that. And that is you become in conflict with what you want versus what other people want. Trauma is the same way, you know, and people who go through traumatic events, it's the same thing. And, you know, whether it's somebody being physically abused or sexually abused or emotionally abused, what's going on is somebody is trying to control them and prevent them, whether physically or sexually. It's a control thing. Even violence, you're trying to control somebody. That is an extreme example of what happens on the psychological level when your parents or your society or your church tells you that if you're a good person, you're going to want to do A, B, C, D, F, and G. So when you go after your soul desire, you're confronted with all these different opposing things, whether it was past trauma because somebody was controlling you, or it was, you know, religion. But you have to face the possibility that you will be rejected for following your true path. And when people don't follow their true path because they're trying to appease an abuser or parents or church, they become fragmented. They become in conflict with their soul. And so this is what really soul retrieval is all about. The fact that somebody goes into trance and goes to the underworld and sees their soul hiding in a dark place, and they encourage the soul to come out, the end result is guaranteed, mark my words, guaranteed. What will happen is when that person comes out of that and is healed from that, they will then do something that they haven't been allowing themselves to do every single time. That's how you know somebody has come out of soul retrieval. So it's all symbolic. For me, one of the reasons why I try to distance from all of the hoo-hooey, you know, stuff is because it can sometimes people get wrapped up in soul retrieval, and then they buy into the illusion that somebody's soul is actually out of their body and trapped somewhere in the world, and then that buys into a victim mentality. When in reality, it's a symbolic thing. So that's my method. Somebody else's shamanic method, you know, will work for somebody else. My method is you don't need to go through all that. You just need to ask yourself, what makes me happy? What gives me joy? And then as you go after it, you're going to be confronted with all of your psychological and past life blocks about, you know, am I going to be loved? I can't tell you how many times I go through this. It's just the theme. When people are on the verge of doing what they want, they'll give me some excuse about why they can't do it. And because I can see through it, I go, that's about pleasing your parents. And if they think about it, they go, you're right. I'm trying to please mom and dad. You know, let me give you a really, you know, horrific example. And if there's any kids in the room, you know, get them out of the room, because I'm going to share some really traumatic stuff. Now, I didn't learn this. This was shared to me by somebody else, and I'll try not to go into too much detail. It was a father who was sexually abusing his son. And do things like, at one point, he broke his son's legs so he could sexually abuse him. Okay? Just leave it right there. How horrific. That man grew up and still struggled with, I wonder if my dad loves me. After somebody did that to him, he still wanted that person's love. That's how strong our need is to meet other people's approval. I'm not minimizing that. I'm a warrior. So that's how I go after that. When I hear, you know, like I was talking about earlier, people give excuses why they don't want to invest in some really relatively inexpensive course I offer. And I just go, I don't buy it. I don't believe that you do. If you really wanted it, you'd find the money. I'm not asking for $10,000. It's, you know, it's all reasonable. You'd do it if it was a car, if it was a phone, you'd do it. We find the money if we want it. I get aggressive, and I get dismissive, and I get direct, because that's my method, because I'm a warrior. That's how I do it. But it doesn't mean that I don't acknowledge how traumatic it is to go up against those karmic and psychological blocks. But that's how I do it. I'm a fighter, so I fight. I've always been that way. Your way may be different, but there's still no excuse. Ultimately, here's the bottom line. It doesn't matter how much you feel the universe has it in for you. There is no excuse for not living your joy. You will be held accountable for it. This is what physical disease is. This is what mental disease is. This is what bad karma is. People say, if the universe was fair, why are children born in third world countries and horrible? I don't know why their soul chose to do that. But there's no, even if things are unconscious, even if you're not consciously aware of why you sabotage your life, you'll be held accountable, because it's your life. Not because you broke God's rules or anybody else's rules, but because you betrayed yourself. And you will be held accountable for that. That's why, I'll give another example. Again, I've shared this before. There's a woman that I know, and she's in a really uncomfortable life situation, relationship situation. Won't get into the specifics. It's none of you guys listening to me. And, it really bothers her that she can't get out of it. And, she'll cry, like it's really painful. She just can't bring herself to get out of it. And I'll say, so this is painful for you, the thought of leaving. She says, yeah, it's really painful. Why? Because I don't want to fight. I don't like confrontation. I don't want them to be mad at me. I don't want them to hate me. And I say, so this creates a lot of pain for you. Yeah, it's really painful. So staying in it is really painful. Yes, it's miserable. I talked myself into it, but I hate myself for being here. And I said, so no matter what you do, you're going to be in pain, right? Yeah. So one is you don't do anything and you're in horrific pain. It's intolerable, right? The other one is you confront the person and you leave them and you put yourself in the position to have them hate you. And that's painful, right? But one is only going to get worse, and the other one will eventually get better. And so since both of them are painful, you might as well do the painful one that's going to give you the rewards. That's how the life works. Your soul is set up that way that if you do not do the painful thing that will bring you your joy, you will end up punishing yourself for it. Disease, insanity, a next life that's even more challenging. That's all you trying to slap yourself out of it so that you go, holy crap, the only thing that matters is my happiness. What am I doing? It's the whole reason you incarnate. It's what it's all about. And so if you want to be free and you want to achieve liberation, all you have to do is, my way as the warrior, is fight for your happiness. I'm stepping off the edge of a cliff here. I'm putting myself in debt. And you don't want to know how much debt I'm in. I'm putting myself in debt to jump off a cliff to go live in another country that I may not ever be able to live there. Now, if I end up there and my business falls apart, I'm screwed. But I've learned that if I don't risk, if I'm not willing to die for what I want, I'm not happy. So I'm in the midst. We'll see what happens. You guys are going to be there. You're going to, in real time, you're going to see what my life turns into. We'll find out if I'm right or not. But it's never failed me. It's always served me. Whenever I jump off the cliff, You know, it's always, my life has gotten a billion times better. So if my past is any indication, I'm gonna be fucking king of the universe here in a year or so. So we'll see. All right. DJ Barry, if you have a question, write question and then write out something. You know, I don't do general questions. Explain more on revival practice. I don't know what that is, but even that, it sounds very general. I can't give you a deep answer to something that general, but I don't know what a revival practice is. So if you're trying to ask about retrieval practice, that's something else. And anyway, I already answered that. George Ottaway question, my Aruda is Saturn retrograde in the third house. How do I dress like a lone mountain? Well, it depends on what sign it's in, and it depends on if there are any other planets there. It depends on the strength of the Lord of that house. It depends on the aspects. It depends on all kinds of different things. But, you know, the video kind of just gave it out. If you've got Saturn retrograde in the third house, then people see you as a loner. And they see you as somebody who's justice-minded and follows the rules, dependable, strong, rooted, grounded. So you follow your own intuition. Now, because Saturn is retrograde, it becomes really self-critical, which is why you're asking me, how should I dress like a lone mountain? So, you know, you're going to have to learn to listen to your own instincts. What's just popped into my head is maybe you should ask some of your friends. Tell me how you see me. This is what I learned in astrology, blah, blah, blah. How does that jive with you? And how do you think, you know, how should I dress? Ask their opinion. Maybe you'll get a better answer that way. Okay. Out of the blue. Often, Roxy W says audio is a bit low, to which I say then turn your volume up. Anyway, I'm working on that. I put on a new case, which seems to have muted my volume, and I don't really know why, but turn your volume up. Out of the blue. That's not, I don't see a question there. Okay. Djembe Fola. By the way, you know what? I have a djembe with a torn skin that I'm not going to take with me, so I gotta give that away to somebody now that you mention it. Djembe Fola. Question. How do you know you are free of attachments? Well, I don't know that I am. Obviously, you're not, and neither am I, because we are in the body. If you have a skin sac on you, then you are not free of attachments. I was talking earlier about being free, but that's a perfectionist goal that we can only strive for. You'll never be free of attachments as long as you're an incarnating human. So just give yourself a break. But how you know you're free of attachments is depending on what it is we're talking about. You don't have any attachments. Like today, I don't have any attachments whether or not you guys like what I have to say or not, which is why I'm hammering away at racists and folkish ossetry. Because I don't care if they like me or not. I'm not attached to it. I am attached to how I look. I'm like 20 pounds overweight. You know, I've been lifting a lot, so I've gained a lot of muscle, but I haven't been surfing, and I've tried on some pants, and holy crap, I got fat. I'm attached to how I look. If I wasn't attached to how I look, I would say, you know what, I'm really healthy, I'm really strong, who gives a shit? But I'm not. So how you know you're attached is when you can say, who gives a shit? Then you know you're not attached. Is it only fear which points these out? Well, everything comes down to that. I mean, I'm afraid people are, you know, what I'm afraid of is that I'm going to go to Australia and walk along the beach with my shirt off, and women are going to go, oh my God, look at that, how fat that guy is. That's my fear. So yeah, I'm attached. Fear shows you what your attachments are. But listen, don't try and be perfect. Just try and live your life. Just try and enjoy your life. Steve Borowski question. And out of the blue, yeah, I'd prefer it if you just kept your comments to questions, because I have to scroll through and it takes time away from people who are asking questions. Steve Borowski question: I've heard you mention the Agori sect of Hinduism. Yes, I have. Could you comment on how these methods work and what is the karmic impetus for doing them? I wrote a big research paper on them recently. Well, it sounds like you know more than I do. You probably do know a lot more than I do. I can only tell you my limited reaction to it, which is, first off, that is not my path. So I can't really talk knowledgeably about something that's not my path. I can appreciate a lot of things about it, so maybe that's something we could dovetail in. The Agori sect, when done right, is about non-attachment, and it's about it's also about fulfilling all of your desires. So they do all kinds of things that I tell people not to do, and it's because they're not healthy. They're really unhealthy things for you. They destroy your energy body, they destroy your physical body, they're very bad for you mentally, psychologically. But the theory behind it is that when you fulfill all of your even earthly, physical, forbidden desires, then you aren't held in bondage by them. Whereas if somebody is trying to do the right-hand path, which is follow all of the rules and do everything correctly, what they get is discipline. This is what you get. The right-hand path gives discipline, which is necessary. Discipline means that you don't react to every single thought and feeling that you have, which is extremely important. So somebody who's meant to be an Agori in a past life, to be a true Agori, would have already mastered discipline. Because, for instance, like the guys who smoke ganja and say it gets them close to Shiva. The truth of the matter is that smoking ganja is the worst fucking thing you can do for your awareness and for your emotional and psychological awareness. It's damaging. But their philosophy is that they don't succumb to the influence of the intoxicant. So I don't have a lot of faith that can ever be done. My experience and my belief is that when you start playing around with Rahu, Rahu will take you captive. And if that's the lesson that you get, then in the next life you'll be, you'll end up being a recovering alcoholic or something where you can't touch it. So again, it's all, if you look at it all, in the full expression of things, you see that. What I've heard is that successful Agoris, people who become Agoris and master it, what ends up happening is that, when they get to the end of their life, they're the most loving, most tolerant people who will guide you to do things that are healthy for you. The right-hand path is meant to teach you discipline, so you find the truth through discipline. The left-hand path is that you satiate yourself to such a point you go, oh my God, this is meaningless. This is the lesson of Rahu. Rahu says if you eat all the food that you want, eventually you go, oh my God, I'm just not satisfied anymore, and then you become healthy. You drink until you puke all the time, and you go, this is just not fun at all, I don't want to drink anymore. You have sex every day with a different woman every 10 minutes until you finally go, this is just tearing me up inside, I want love. So that's ultimately where the Agori path is taking them. It's taking them through that excess to find the middle ground where they don't deny their feelings and their desires, but at the same time, they're not a slave to them. So it's an extreme. That's why I don't recommend extremes. I recommend dynamic balance. So the karmic impetus, I think I sort of said it. One would be in a past life they mastered discipline. And so in this life their soul is, discipline was great, but it wasn't satisfying either. It was an illusion. Purity is as much of an illusion as debauchery. They're both an illusion. And just be human. is the ultimate, lesson. Here's the thing, I've said this before, but truly enlightened people, you'll never ever be able to pick them out of a crowd. A truly enlightened, if somebody is floating down the street, and I'm not making light of this, if there's somebody who has an incredibly powerful spiritual aura about them, where everybody just gets healed and sees the light, and that person's not enlightened yet. They're only going through a phase. And eventually they'll go through the phase that's super, even if they're if they're not frauds, they're going to go, you know what, this isn't it either. And then they will realize what life is all about. And they'll go, this life is a game. It's a video game, and we're supposed to play the game. And so they will play the game. You'll never know it. I talked about the Grand Master of the sect that I was in. If you walk, trust me, this guy has powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men, like you wouldn't believe. But he's incredibly humble, and he's a very nice guy. And if you stop him on the street and you ask him about his abilities, he will totally deny it. Look, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm just a Tai Chi teacher, and that's what I mean. Now he's not there yet, because there are those of us who know who he really is. But if he were truly enlightened, nobody would know. So you'll never see him. How did I get to that? I don't know. George Ottaway. Okay, that's it. No more questions. So that's it for me. I've been talking for 2 hours. I'm done. I'm tired of listening to myself. So again, neo.thunderwizard.com are the 4 things that you need. If you want to see all the stuff that I have available, go to courses.thunderwizard.com. And of course, if you like this channel, subscribe, hit the bell button. If you want to support this channel, then I invite you to get something that you want. I don't take donations. The reason why I don't take donations is because I just have this thing where if you're going to give me money, I want to give you something in return. And maybe that's my ego, and maybe at some point I'll just take donations, but I want to give you something for what I get, and I believe in giving something of value. So there's no shortage of things up here that you're going to want. There's something in there you're going to want. So go, if you want to support the channel, go get something. The other way you can support this channel is to go to thunderwizard.com and sign up as an apprentice. And what I'm promoting now is the Manifestation Mastery course. And that will give you access to all of the shamanism, and it's almost nothing for how much you get for it. You can learn shamanism from A to Z and runes from A to Z. And we talk about manifestation. And when I get settled in Australia, and hopefully the internet will be working for me, then I'm going to have live question and answers on the Patreon channel, where we're really going to go in depth, and I will be ask you questions, and we can get into a dialogue. So if you want to support the channel, those are some ways that you can do it, and there you are. All right, so that's it for me. I'm done listening to myself. I'll check, see if there's any last minute questions. Nope, we're all done for today. Thank you, mein Freunds. I will see you probably sometime this week coming up here. I'll figure out something to talk about. All right. As you were.